Hi, I'm Amy Fitzgerald, Editorial Director for Carolrhoda Books and Carolrhoda Lab, and I'm going to share a little about our middle grade and young adult novels for the fall 2022 season. A Long Way from Home by Laura Schaefer is a middle grade novel about 12-year-old Abby, who has a lot of anxiety about everything from large existential issues like climate change to very personal issues like having to move from Pennsylvania to Florida for her mom's new job with an aerospace company. She happens to meet these two boys who are from the future, from a time when, according to them, all the problems of the 21st century have been solved, and they need Abby's help to complete a mission before they head back to their own time. So Abby sees this as a great opportunity to ditch the 21st century and start a new life with her new friends in the utopian future. This doesn't quite go according to plan, and Abby finds herself grappling with her responsibilities to her time. Within the sci-fi framework, there's a lot of real-world STEM content. Abby's a very science-minded kid, so readers will learn a lot from her about, for instance, rocket technology. And those elements are a really nice complement to the emotional focus of the story. Hear Me, a middle grade novel by Carrie O'Malley Sarah, focuses on 12-year-old Rayne, who's experiencing progressive hearing loss. She uses hearing aids, but they're not helping as much as they did at first, and her hearing is continuing to worsen. Her parents think the solution, the way to quote unquote fix her, is to have her get cochlear implants. This involves a fairly major surgery that can restore hearing. It usually works, but not 100% of the time. And the hearing experience isn't the same as it would be for someone hearing naturally. So, for instance, people may not be able to experience music the same way that they did before their hearing loss. Rayne does not want this surgery, but her parents aren't listening to her, and she ends up having to go to pretty drastic lengths to take matters into her own hands. Along the way, though, she discovers there are actually a lot of different ways for people with hearing loss to exist in the world, including being fully deaf and proudly deaf. So she's rethinking her own assumptions about what her hearing loss means and what kind of life is possible for her. The author also experienced hearing loss starting when she was very young, and she only recently, in her 40s, got her first cochlear implant. So she's drawing on her own experience, plus lots of consultation with experts to create this story of one kid's journey with hearing loss. In Top Prospect by Paul Volponi, a middle school football star is going into his freshman year and immediately starts getting recruited by colleges. The culture of college football teams recruiting young players years before they graduate high school comes with a lot of shadiness and a lot of risks for Travis, the main character. Not to mention that he's got to deal with the pressure of making decisions that could shape his life after high school and beyond. This is out in paperback for the first time. We have a paperback edition of A Time Traveler's Theory of Relativity by Nicole Valentine. In this middle grade novel, a boy finds out that all the women in his family are time travelers, that his mother is lost somewhere in time, and that he may be the first boy in his family with the ability to time travel, which is convenient because he needs to find and help his mom before a more sinister figure locates her. Last of the Name is a middle grade novel by Roseanne Perry, getting its first paperback printing. It's about an Irish immigrant boy who shows up in New York City in the middle of the Civil War in 1863 and has to navigate the racial and class tensions that the war has intensified while trying to build a new life for himself. Torch is a new young adult novel by Lynn Miller Lockman set in 1969 in what was then the country of Czechoslovakia. The Soviet Union has recently invaded and shut down all the new freedoms and reforms that have been taking root there. Things are looking very bleak, especially to a boy named Pavel, who at the beginning of the story, in an act that the book is very careful not to glamorize or endorse, takes his own life as a form of protest against the oppressive new policies. That leaves his three closest friends in a really precarious position. The government is investigating them to see if they're involved in the same kind of dissident behavior and is inclined to punish them for Pavel's defiance. Plus, each of them has secrets of their own that could get them into trouble in their own right. So these three teens who were not friends with one another before are now drawn together by their grief for Pavel and by the danger they're facing. The author researched this story extensively, including interviewing people who lived in Czechoslovakia during this period. And as an exploration of what young people have to do to survive in a climate of fear where difference is criminalized, I think this is going to resonate with a lot of teens reading in the US today. In Funeral Girl, a YA novel by debut author Emma K. Oland, Georgia's family runs a funeral home, and Georgia has a lot of anxiety about death, as well as a lot of unprocessed grief for her deceased grandmother. On top of all that, she has the ability to summon the spirits of the dead. So when a dead body passes through the funeral home, she revives the person's spirit and asks if they have any final requests or if there's anything about themselves that they want remembered. This is her way of coping with her own fear of death and dying. But then a classmate of hers dies in an accident, shows up at the funeral home, gets revived by Georgia, and has some particular demands that Georgia wasn't expecting. So Georgia is forced to rethink her relationship to her grief and her fears about mortality. This story was inspired by the author's own anxieties that began in childhood, and it's by turns dryly funny and really earnestly thoughtful. Mary McCoy's Printz Honor-winning YA novel, I, Claudia, is out in paperback. This is essentially a political thriller for teens. It follows an outcast girl rising through the ranks of her corrupt high school student government in an exploration of power and responsibility that has only gotten more compelling since it was first published in 2018. Those are the novels for our fall season, and I hope you'll check them out.